One major concept in macroeconomics that we'll come back to multiple times is something called the circular flow diagram. And the circular flow diagram basically explains the relationship between households and firms. So we'll call this square households, and over here we'll have firms or businesses. And what we're going to look at is the ways in which households and businesses interact. And they interact actually in two separate markets. So there's one market that we're all very familiar with, and that is the product market. In the product market, households are used to buying products for businesses. So you, for example, take your money to a store or a restaurant and you buy something. All right, so you take your money and you spend it, and in return you get what we'll call goods and services. And we know that in the product market, the businesses or the firms provide the goods and services. And as a result, they actually earn money, right? They earn money from selling us the goods and services. And we can be a little bit more specific in labeling the money on this diagram so that when the households spend money, we're going to call that consumption or consumer expenditures. And when the businesses receive it, we're going to call that money revenue. So what we haven't maybe become as familiar with over time is this other market, which is what we call the resource market or the factor market. So the resource market up here is where households become the sellers. So what is it that households sell? Well, we assume that households own all of the resources. So for example, you sell your labor. But we're going to say that households can sell land as well as labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, all of the different resources. And not surprisingly, what they earn from that is their income or their wages. So we could use either to describe it. And if we wanted to be really specific, we would say the payment for the use of land is called a rent, and the payment for the use of labor is called a wage, and the payment for the use of capital is called interest, and the payment for the use of entrepreneurship is called profit. So all of those together might be considered income. So you'll notice that households earn income in this resource market, and then they spend it, right? They consume in the product market. And if there's money left over, we're going to call that savings. So a lot of this we're going to come back to later. We're going to elaborate on in more detail. Businesses go to the resource market to essentially shop for resources. So they're going to be taking their money, again, with them, and they're going to be buying those factors of production or the resources. So they're going to buy the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And in response, they're going to have to spend money, and we call that costs. So a business earns revenue and it pays out costs, and if they have extra, right, then we're going to call that profit. And if they lose, they're going to have a loss. So you can see a neater version of my messy circular flow diagram on this slide. This one is from a textbook, and you can see it very clearly has all of the same things. So the activity that we're going to do in class is we're going to actually act out the simple circular flow diagram. So some students will be households, and some students will be businesses. And the students who are businesses are going to receive name tags, and they're also going to receive money. And this seems a little strange, right? How do businesses just come upon this money? But if you think about it, when somebody starts a business, like an entrepreneur starts a business, they typically are going to have to do some type of fundraising. They might spend their own savings, but they also might borrow the money, right? They might get initial investors. So you can think of this money that the businesses have at the beginning as something maybe they borrow from a bank or from some initial investors. Households are going to start the game with resources. So you're either going to get land, you're going to have labor, or you're going to have capital. We're not going to do entrepreneurship in this activity. So land is going to be represented by little pieces of wood, and labor is going to be represented by eyes, little googly eyes, and capital is going to be represented by a screw. And you'll start with 12 pieces of resource. You might get all of the same kind, or you might get a mix of the kinds of resources that you have. So here's how the game is going to work. In the game, you're either going to be a producer or a household. If you're a producer, you start with $100 and you buy resources from households. you have to negotiate the price. There's not a set price. When you have 1 unit of each, you can produce 1 econo, or a puffball. Then you're going to sell these back to the households and try to earn some money. If you're a household, you will start with 12 units of resources, and you'll sell your resources to producers. Again, you have to negotiate with them the price because there's not a set price. And with your money, you're going to buy econos. Let's look at that one more time. Businesses, you're going to receive a name tag that says business. It's a little sticker, so you need to wear it for the entirety of the class period and the activity. You're going to use your $100 that you're given to buy resources. You can buy them from anybody who doesn't have a business name tag. There's no set price, so you'll need to negotiate what you're willing to pay for the resources. Obviously, you want to pay as little as possible so you can buy as many resources as possible. But be careful not to spend all of your money on one kind of resource, because in order to produce a product, in order to produce a puffball, you need 1 piece of wood, 1 eye, and 1 screw. So you need all of the resources in order to produce a product. If you spend all of your money on eyeballs, you won't be able to produce anything. And as a business, you can't resell the resources to other businesses. This is because we're doing a very simplified version of the circular flow diagram. So be careful when you're negotiating. When you have all 3, bring them up to the instructor and you will be able to exchange them for 1 puffball. Then you can sell the puffballs to the households. So you can start doing this at any time. As soon as you have 1, you can sell it, or you can try to accumulate as many puffballs as you can before you start selling them. It's really up to you. You have to sell them only to consumers. So if somebody has a business name tag on, you cannot sell a puffball to them. Your goal is to finish with more than the $100 you started with. If you think of a business and they borrowed money from a bank, in order to be able to pay back the loan, they have to actually earn more than the $100. So if you break even with 100, that's okay, right? But you would be in trouble in terms of paying back your bank loan with interest. If you end with less than $100, then your business would probably go out of business. You would be taking a loss because you spent more on the costs than you earned in revenues. And households, you're not going to have name tags. Your goal is to sell your resources, all of them, because any resources you're left with, that's just waste, right? Think of yourself as operating inside the PPC. Again, negotiate the price. You want to sell your resources for as much as possible so that you earn a lot of income and you have more money to spend. Once you've sold all the resources, your goal is to buy puffballs. These puffballs represent every consumer good that you could possibly want: a house, a car, food, clothing. So there's really no point to just accumulating dollars. You want to have stuff. So your goal is to have as many puffballs as possible, and the most successful workers are going to have the highest income and be able to negotiate for the most puffballs. Any questions? Be sure to ask questions before we get started, because then it's time to play, and you will have a 2-minute warning when it's time to stop. After the activity is done, you are going to answer a few questions. So your instructor will be asking you these questions: which businesses earned the most profit and how? Which households bought the most puffballs and how? What is important to know in this game? What advice would you give to others? And then you're actually going to complete a reflection on Moodle. So I'll show you where that is. On the Moodle site, the reflection is under week 1, and you can see it's right here, Econoland reflection. So you're going to go to that and you're going to answer a few simple questions about the activity. What was your role? How was your role involved in the circular flow? What did you learn from the simulation? What do you wish you'd known first? And what questions do you have about the circular flow or the activity? We'll also debrief and discuss this activity in our next class period.